Hey everybody, so my friends are asking me to continue with the play-by-play and tell this story uh, of January. So, alright, at the end of December there's a Christmas party. I'm at the Christmas party and Hyungjin's thinking about opening a coffee shop. And he's going to call it Rod of Iron Coffee. And I said, is it going to be like a drive-through kiosk? Because down where I live, there's this very famous drive-through coffee kiosk, which is a pretty cool idea. I don't think I'll ever do it myself, but pretty cool idea. You see a line of cars there every morning. People don't even have to get out of their car, you know. But he said, yeah, Rod of Iron Coffee. What do you think, Rod of Iron? And I'm going to have these guns on there and this kind of thing and da-da-da-da. So he was just baking up what now is this full-blown Rod of Iron thing. And I didn't know how bad it was about to get because it was in this really early stage thought, right? This was December 2017. So anyway, I remember saying to him, I could just hear Father saying, I'll show you the Rod of Iron. Because I know that the Rod of Iron is symbolized the authority of the Messiah himself and the truth. But the manifestation of that truth is the lineage. And so I was thinking, the Rod of Iron is for the sexual organ in my joke, right? And yeah, I don't know how he took it. He seemed to take it in a, I don't know. He just got up and walked off to visit other guests anyway. But I do remember that was like early when I realized he's going somewhere with this Rod of Iron theme. So that's all I want to talk about in January. In December. So in January, we're still going to jiu-jitsu. The reason why we went to the Christmas party, I told you before, is because we're totally okay with having a normal relationship. We don't hate any of these people. I think I made my case that within church is this safe space for the archangel mindset, and the archangel mindset distracts us from tribal messiahship, distracts us from deriving our elements primarily through family, and you can see all the other abuses that are possible when you have a hierarchy that takes citizenry and puts citizenry in a secondary position. So we don't want any of that. We want to treat people like they're brothers and sisters. We're going to visit aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters. And if they have projects, we want to help them with their projects. It's just that Hyungjin's church project, I don't want to help him with that project anymore. So he's building up a community of friends that are into jiu-jitsu and bushcrafting. I saw no problem with that. And he's practically our neighbor as far as the global unification community goes. He's practically our neighbor. So anyway, that's what we were doing. One night at jiu-jitsu, my wife was approached by Yana, and she said, Mrs. Kang wants to see you. So we go one day, the whole family, to go see Mrs. Kang. And so we're sitting there in the was it the dining room? The living room. We were sitting there in the living room in Hyungjin's house with Mrs. Kang. And Mrs. Kang, she wants to know one thing. She says, I want to know if you're not coming to church anymore because of me. And I'm like, really? I mean, internally you got to understand that I was not coming to church because of the Nazgul, the ring wraiths, and the effect that they were about to have or planning to have on my family. And, because I could see that from a mile away. And I hadn't actually thought about Mrs. Kang deeply because at the time of 923 back then, I was embroiled in two issues, the gag order issue and, so Mrs. Kang is a total ambush to me. And she was an ambush to everybody. I mean, everybody has to accept this reality in ambush style because of, some quote-unquote need for secrecy right up until the point. So, much like they ambushed the knights with the added layers of meaning, everybody's ambushed with Mrs. Kang. So I hadn't really thought about it. So I didn't tell Mrs. Kang. I hadn't made an assessment of Mrs. Kang and that whole situation. I had heard people arguing over it, and I thought they made valid points. And I'm not going to talk about that in this video. I'm going to tell you what I told Mrs. Kang. I said, Mrs. Kang, I was an unchurched Christian. And I described my life before I came to the Unification Movement. And then I described my life in the Unification Movement. Very briefly, God was there helping me say all the necessary things. Boom, boom, boom. So Mrs. Khan understood instantly what I was talking about me living a more pure life, my kids doing conditions. I said my son had just got finished fast condition. My daughter had just got finished doing a study condition. I said, I know about the unchurched reality, and you know, I'm confident there. And over here, these church leaders are like this, 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 and this. And as soon as I was talking about the limitation and the games of the church leaders in the church, she leaned back and she goes, I understand. I know what you're talking about. So she said, I'm not worried about you anymore. Okay? And then so we broke up. She went upstairs about her business, and the meeting was over. And so then Yana, I go to the bathroom. When I come out of the bathroom, Yana's talking to my wife about how the Sunday school program really needs her or us back. I don't know whether she said my wife or us or whatever. And when I came in and I was listening to the tail end of it, I stepped in and I said, you know, Yana, you talking about us coming back. I said, yes, your members of your staff are pretty treacherous, you know. And this is, you know, they never formally let me tell them the details of the gag order, Richard trying to trap me in the gag order, Lourdes doing Lucia Nazareth, breaking the gag order, Tim going around talking about how there's no channel gook, Doug walking around saying that I'm like John Walker. You know, these are unaddressed issues. They didn't care to address them. And so I said, you know, those guys are treacherous people. And she instantly went into this. It was almost like a rehearsed defense maneuver. And she goes, yeah, they say you're terrible. They say you're terrible. And I'm like, yeah, but nobody told me what I did. So I'm thinking, okay, she needs to see like what my actual complaint is. She needs to see that I'm not just saying, oh, they're bad. That's what they're doing to me. Oh, Jamal's bad. But so I go home and I draft up 7 paragraphs. 1 paragraph for each one of the most egregious things that the Nazgul had done. And back then I was calling them 7 dwarfs because, you know, I really wasn't bothered too much by Lowell or Robert so much. Okay, so I called them the 7 dwarfs back then. And so I emailed to her, I CC'd Hyunjin, a paragraph about their problem. Okay, I said Richard doesn't believe in theology. I sat down in a Dunkin' Donuts in Patterson. He said he doesn't believe in theology. He said theology is just an arena where people push their ideas at each other. That's what he said. He said you wind up arguing and somebody comes out on top, and that's all theology is. I'm like, I realized he's not bothered by the fact that he has that belief and he's the president of a so-called church. So he's like the president of a church. So that was my complaint against him. I was like, your president doesn't even believe in theology. I couldn't even explain to him in that Dunkin' Donuts why there is an issue historically with Archangel. I tried to, but he dismissed all of theology so that he didn't have to track the matter of the workers in the church. Or the fact that Father said that young members would be persecuted by older members. None of that had any traction with him. Because he said he just dismissed theology. So that's just one example of what I was saying. I was saying your president doesn't even believe in theology. And I'm getting, I have a house guest at the time. And I get a blip back, an email back. And I'm checking my phone, this email. So it's from Hyunjin. And basically, Hyunjin is mad. He said, you give me a litany of complaints about other people. He said, why don't you tell me what you did? And from the 5-hour conversation 2 months earlier, the fact of the matter is, I couldn't tell whether, I could tell that he had forfeited his will for them and their will. And I know that they didn't have anything on me because it would have come out. All they had was cursing and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm pretty technical and neurotic with examining myself. I could really fill pages and pages and pages of confession of things that, you know, problems that I have. I really could. Any neurotic person could, because neurotic people always take problems primarily as if, what is it that I could have done about it? People with character disorder always take the issue as, oh, what did somebody else do wrong? So I'm fundamentally neurotic, which is why I stayed in this relationship with the church for 2 decades. Most people would just liberate themselves once they see a certain number of inconsistencies. So anyway, I'd had enough of my neuroticism being the reason for my problems in the church. I totally washed myself of the idea that me having a problem, me having a weakness, means that Abel has a good point, and so let me go back under Abel one more time, okay? In the era where we're not supposed to be under Abel anymore. So my neuroticism didn't serve me, and so I kept a really good eye on it at that point in my life. So when he tried to access my neuroticism, I was like, so I responded, no, you're actually just changing the subject. So, you know, I don't want to join you in changing the subject. And then he said, but I think I said, I do have regret. My regret is trying to use the Chattanooga Constitution to bring the public official into accountability. And he said, he writes back, no sarcasm, you know. And I'm like thinking, I'm not being sarcastic. That's literally my regret. Because by that time in January, brothers and sisters were examining the fact that the Chattanooga Constitution has this really nasty contradiction in it. Okay, it says the kingdom didn't come, it hasn't come yet, and then it's supposedly immutable, which means the kingdom will never come. If the kingdom didn't come yet and it's immutable to say that, then the kingdom will never come. That's just a silly little opening problem with it. But then there's the secret council. Who wrote it? I mean, even Cookchin can't tell we see that now, 2 years later, Cookchin can't even tell in the deposition who wrote it. Even though Jim Bohr pretty much confirmed that Cookchin wrote it. And Hyungjin's brother-in-law pretty much confirmed that Cookchin wrote it. And he wrote it in lightning short time. So he threw that shit together pretty fucking quick. But anyway, I regret using that document because that document has baked into it our slavery. So if you can never feel that you were a member of the free nation because the free nation doesn't exist, so then therefore it suspends your state of freedom, therefore slavery. So that's a place where we are free, where we are recognized as citizens, have privileges of citizens, and have registered births and marriages. So if that place doesn't exist, then then nobody in the universe recognizes your rights as a Chattanooga citizen. So what did that document ensure? It ensured that I'd be treated like a person that had no rights. So I wasn't being sarcastic. You hear me, Hyungjin? I wasn't being sarcastic when I said that my one regret was to try to prosecute or bring her into accountability using that document. I don't have a problem so much trying to bring her to account as much as the method. I really regret trying to use that document because that document gave the machine permission to treat me like I had no rights. Because that's what the document does. It treats all the current Chattanooga citizens as if they have no rights. So I'm beating this thing. So let me move on. So then he sees that in an email exchange that I'm not going to render a confession to him because in the back of my mind I think he's going to give it to the machine and then they're going to plaster it. Because they probably think that embarrassing me online is the biggest way to encircle me. Because they're Asian. They think that if everybody's talking about your weakness, then you'll relent and you'll kowtow, right? Which probably wouldn't have happened. And so, but anyway, I'm like, nah, I don't think I'm going to give you ammunition against me. If you don't have ammunition against me, that's your problem. I'm not going to give you ammunition against me. So I wasn't going to tell him, oh yeah, I'm going to write this confession. I just told him, you're distracting from the point. Your wife said to me that they say I'm treacherous or they say I'm terrible. And I'm like, okay, well, let me tell you what they're up to. And let's get this out of, you know, some vague claims. I'm going to tell you specifically. So it was a 1-page, 7-paragraph thing on the 7 dwarfs. So yeah, so he gets to a point where he's like, yo, I'm ordering you to write me a 1-page confession, and if you don't, you are in violation of True Father and his kingship. And I'm like, oh, this shit is heavy. And I'll sit back in my seat and my house guest is sitting right there looking at me, and I'm like, and then I hear the words, conscience above parents, conscience above leader, conscience above teacher, right? And in my conscience, I'm like, not obligated to give a piece of my life. A confession is a piece of my life. Actually, I own it. So I'm not obligated to give this piece of my life to anybody. And there are certainly no circumstances which should force me to cough up this confession in any, does God do that? Did God force the soldiers that fought with Joan of Arc to confess? Or did they realize that they really needed to confess because they need to get into a superior position? So confession is in God's world, in God's mind, in the heavenly sense, is something that free people own and they give because they don't want to be trapped with their secrets. Okay? So, 1, it was a change of subject, and 2, I'm like, you don't have the right to tell me to cough up a piece of my life so that you can distract from what it is that, later they told me that they just wanted me to realize that I have problems too. And I'm like, that's kindergarten. You try to teach people that in church in kindergarten. Of course, you don't flippantly judge people, or it says judge not that ye be not judged, because you don't flippantly like raise yourself up as a judge as if you're above judgment, or as if you're above scrutiny, or you don't judge people for the purpose of gaining a high place so that you can avoid judgment and scrutiny, right? And the truth is a two-edged sword. So change of subject is, if I say I believe in theology and one of the seven dwarfs says he doesn't believe in theology, I'm pretty sure I have the high ground. So if I have the high ground and I don't have that problem, and I say, hey, you should take theology seriously, that's actually not a judgment. From the other guy's side, it seems like a judgment. Okay, anyway, I don't go into this. The point is, I told him, this is what I told him. I said, I'm not your servant. I never took a dime from the church, because I was always a volunteer. I was always in the state of trying to help my brother, okay, and in his project, okay, because I had made my peace with church years ago. Church is not going to get my attention. It's not going to get my love anymore. So I'm baited or tricked into sewing into this machine called church by my own desire to actually just help Hyungjin because he's father's son. And I don't regret that. I regret the fact that he didn't keep his principle of relationship over religion. So he said, sons obey their fathers too. I said, yeah, but grown sons don't obey their fathers in everything. They don't. They actually have the right to figure out where they're going to help their dad and where they're not. Jesus said that I can pick up my life when I want to. My Father loves me because I lay down my life for the brethren. But do you think God ordered Jesus to lay down his life for the brethren? No. And Jesus was saying that. He said, I lay it down in my own will, and I can pick it up when I want. This my Father told me. So I'm not going to lay down pieces of my life that belongs to me in some fiction where he gets to order me. It's outside of the principle where he gets to order me. So that's why I said, I'm not your servant. And he said, well, sons will obey their fathers too. And I'm like, yeah, but that's out of free will, So I'm freely telling him, you're not going to get that confession. You're just trying to change the subject. And but that stroke right there, when he thought that he could order me, I'm like, where did this come from? I'm sort of regretting a little bit that in my absence, me stepping away, there's nobody to temper the push that Cookshanam is making towards this absolute tyranny, which is what it was becoming rapidly. Within 2 months, he got rid of the guy who knows how to balance the issues of freedom because of absolute sex and true identity. He got rid of that guy who knows he's God's son and there ain't shit you can do about it. And so now, Lord has always wanted to worship the guy, and we'd be tempering her like, you can't do that. And Cookton wanted him to be worshipped, and now without somebody who's cavalier, who shows, no, I have a more natural relationship with the guy. I'm not like quivering every time I approach the guy, right? I'm fighting that because he's a celebrity. I'm fighting that because I know that the world of regular relationship is the original world. Anyway, I'm pretty much coming to a close here. I did not offer that confession, and he left it that we're having a discussion about confession now. So as far as he was concerned, he did change the subject, and it was left right there. So he changed the subject. I didn't join him. It was pretty much a stalemate, and I wasn't going to comply with that, and he wasn't going to pay attention to what the seven dwarfs were doing. That was obvious. He was allergic to it. So I think also at that point, because I felt it wasn't him, Doug and those guys, I feel, had sort of brought this about through rationalizing him. Like, they had to rationalize approaching him to squeeze me, which is what they did with the matching and all this kind of stuff. So they had to rationalize that. So the only rationale that I'm familiar with from my experience in the past is that I'm supposed to be in this lower position, and I'm supposed to abide this reality of taking orders. And they probably said to him, it's because you didn't press him yet. So when you press him, you'll find out that he's out of his position. In other words, getting Hyungjin to look at me as whether or not I'm a bad angel or a good angel. This was the business of the Restoration era. okay, where you were working to be a better angel so that the angel would be convinced that you could do what he could not do back in the garden. So Hyunjin's looking for proof that I can be a good angel because I think they put him on to testing me that way. And I'm like, yo, I don't need to prove to you that I'm God's son. You're not even on the issue of whether I'm God's son. You're focused on whether or not, you know, I'm a good servant, and I'm not a servant. So we're not really having an effective conversation here. And I believe that this situation came about because they probably dared him in some way to change the nature of a relationship and test it that way, and you know, tested to see if he's actually going to leave his position. Well, I actually kept my position as God's son. I didn't fall into this fiction that I need to prove that I've got the chops of a good angel. So that's really what was going on there. So I mean, I'm telling you, Hyunjin, you shouldn't be listening to those guys. They don't know anything about the way our relationship was. They don't know. They don't understand. They messed up the matching. And then they messed up our relationship by recruiting you into their assault campaign. So, I mean, they're nice people. Even I like Doug's smile. It's very cute. I understand why Mrs. Claus really is so in love with him. I mean, honestly speaking, I don't hate any of you, but you're wrong. You're wrong. We're in a different era, and we have to shift our values. And Father said, this is the era of liberation. If you could always walk up to me and test me, and I'm obligated to furnish proof, that's restoration, where we were obligated to furnish proof, give all things to Cain in order to prove that we have superior love and superior way of life. It's not restoration anymore. That debt of proof has been paid. It's been paid. So it's stupid to keep paying down on a debt that's paid in full. Okay? So, look, this stupidity has ruined our relationship. But further than that, beyond that, because now you're looking to exert this high position and authority from their point of view, I imagine that they're telling you that you should you should be able over the whole world in a sense, you know. So that's why I feel like after I left, when there was nobody but them, you became more authoritarian because they're comfortable with that imagery. So anyway. Hey, you guys, talk to you later. All right, thanks.